What is up guys, welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I'm going to be showing you how to build an awesome gaming PC for in and around the $1,500 price point. A build that's going to be primed for 1440p gaming, pun intended, and uses some of ASUS's value-oriented prime range of components, including one of the cheapest RTX 4070 Supers on the market and a 360mm all-in-one that costs less than you might think. I'm going to take you guys along for the ride, showing you how to put this together, talking about whether you should really build it at all, given what's expected over the next few weeks, and hopefully having a good time in the process. Let's do this. Now, we should probably begin by talking about the elephant in the room. Yes, this build is going to be really great, but should you actually assemble it right now? CES is just a week or so away, and we're expecting Nvidia to announce at least their 5090 and 5080, but more recent rumours suggest we might see an update to cards like this 4070 Super by way of a new RTX 5070. Now, it probably does make sense to see what happens in the next couple of weeks. Either way, I'd expect these cards to drop in price, which is a nice bonus considering the Asus Prime range is already one of their MSRP oriented SKUs. The 70 tier of GPU from Nvidia has long been a really good sweet spot for 1440p gaming, giving you enough gaming horsepower to play about with a little bit of ray tracing, certainly leverage things like DLSS and frame generation to push those frame rates up. Now, previously, I would have said not to buy this and to buy the 7900 GRE instead, but since Black Friday and Cyber Monday, the GRE's been basically out of stock everywhere, and where it has been in stock, it's been a lot more expensive than this, which makes this in the current climate, I think, the slightly better option. Now, it pairs up perfectly with this, the AMD Ryzen 5 9600X. I've talked about this in a few videos now. The 9600X didn't make sense when it launched, it was too expensive, it's now cheaper, and you should buy one. 6 cores, 12 threads, really good clock speeds, and for gaming, it really is all you need. Even in our testing recently, where we looked at a wide range of CPUs and paired them up with an RTX 4080 Super, there really wasn't as much drop-off as you'd think in GPU-bound gaming applications against this Ryzen 5 chip versus a higher-end 9800X 3D even. So for the price, well under $250, this is what I would go for. It's not a particularly hot chip, however, you guys know that I do like to leverage 360mm all-in-ones where I can. The reason for that is that I think it looks better, it's quieter than a tower air cooler, and the addition of 3 extra fans gives the case more exhaust, more active airflow. That's never a bad thing. Going out and buying a decent pack of 3 fans might set you back $30, $40 anyway. Add that to the $30 or $40 you would have spent on an air cooler, and you're actually not left with that much more money when you look at some of these liquid-cooled options. As I say, this is also part of the Asus Prime range, so big thanks to them for sending it out for this video, and it's one of their cheapest all-in-one liquid cooler. So again, trying to keep costs down, and hopefully the build theme should match quite nicely. Talking of keeping costs down, I've gone for another couple of savvy components as far as the wallet's concerned, with 32GB of 6000 MHz DDR5 from Corsair. I've seen this as low as $89 on Newegg, but I'll put latest pricing and availability for Newegg and Amazon for a range of different regions down below. So prices do change. Some things will go up, some things will go down. So check those out for the latest info. An MP44L provides the storage in this build. This is a 1TB drive, which is more than enough for a few games. 2TB is a really sensible upgrade. Again, if you've got that money to spend, the MP44L 2TB is a great bet too. Let's talk about power while we're here. 850 watts. This is again the Asus Prime 850 Gold. I've seen the 750 version of this, well under $100. The 850 probably has slightly more wattage than you need. I know some of you like to have that bit of wiggle room. Based on some comments in a recent video I made about parts to avoid in 2025, you can watch that full video in the cards now, and it sticks with the theme and actually looks rather nice. Plus, of course, it is ATX 3.0 compatible, giving you that new cable for those new GPUs that you may need, depending on, again, what Nvidia release in the coming weeks. Motherboard wise, we're still waiting on AMD's budget-oriented B series chipset for Ryzen 9000, and while a lot of the B650 boards are compatible, I opted for a cheaper X870 board instead. It's not a Prime board, but Asus do have Prime boards available. This is a tough design, which is a little bit more gamery. However, it's going to give us all those advantages of the new chipsets. This has widespread PCI Generation 5 support, and you've also got Wi-Fi 7 on board as well, which I like to see, as well as decent VRM cooling and good motherboard coverage as far as fan headers, USB ports is concerned. This board ticks a lot of boxes, which is nice. I do want to briefly talk about the case, as it's the only part I've not yet discussed, and this right here is the Montech Sky Two GX, and I really like this case. Now, it's got a few handy features, such as a little tempered glass side panel door that easily swings open and pops off. How simple was that? Loads of compatibility for things like radiators radiators at the top and the front. You get 340mm fan included, which is nice to see. Montech have absolutely killed it this year. I really cannot say enough good things about the cases that they've released. The King 95, King 65, Sky 2 GX, all good stuff. Now what I'm going to do is build up the motherboard assembly first and then go ahead and move this into the case. I'm going to start off by installing the CPU into the CPU socket, then of course the RAM into the second and fourth DIMM slots. They're the grey slots on the board today, and the M.2 drive into the top M.2 slot too, all using my handy new LTT screwdriver. Not an ad at all, just I bought one and I really quite like it. I am just going to do a little bit of prep for the cooler as well before going all gung-ho and moving the motherboard into the case. Normally with AMD CPUs, we'll need to remove the pre-installed black plastic brackets, and I'm interested to see with our prime cooler whether or not that's the case. Now first impressions are pretty strong. It actually has all the fans we need already installed onto the cooler, which is good, and gets even better. I think, yeah, they're all one unit, so you've literally just got a single CPU fan and a single RGB header, and then there is actually a pass-through, so if you want to daisy chain stuff, you can. How do we install this on an AMD processor? So it is typical, it is as I expected, it's the way that I like it to be done as well, so good work ASUS. These black plastic brackets need removing, then we're going to add the new standoffs on and into place and change the bracket on the bottom of the CPU cooler from Intel, which comes pre-installed, to AMD. The rest can wait till later, and this little bit of prep is going to make your life far more simple. Then it's a simple case of popping the motherboard in. Because this is an ATX board in an ATX case, you should be okay in terms of standoffs, and it's a nice and simple job. Just get it lined up. The raised center standoff should hold the board into place, and then you can use the included motherboard screws at the rear of the case to screw it down. 3 at the top, 3 along the middle, and a further 3 down the bottom. I'm then going to go ahead and pop the radiator in, and I think for this I need to remove the top panel of the case, and what that's going to do is allow me far easier access to all the screw mounting holes at the top in order to actually install the radiator a little something like this. In fact, when I say a little something like this, I mean exactly like this. So I'm going to go ahead and secure this down through all the screw hole locations at the top. Then the radiator's pretty much there. It's then a simple case of grabbing a dab of thermal paste. I've got this very fancy ROG thermal paste and popping this onto the CPU. Once you've done this, it's then a case of screwing the water block down, and you can use the included thumb screws and a screwdriver to get these nice and tight. Before doing the GPU, I am also going to sort out the cable and wiring situation in this build, and for that we're going to need our prime 850 watt PSU, and I'm quite excited. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's really interesting actually. So it's got this kind of like white silvery design on this side that wraps around and is on the rear, and then it goes darker on the other side. So it's a power supply of 2 halves, which is really very clever. There's a few cables you're going to need to plug in. These include the motherboard power cable, CPU power cable for the GPU, and of course any SATA power cables for any included RGB hubs. So get the power supply into the rear of the case. Fan down I'm going to go for to pull in fresh air from underneath, and then plug up the motherboard to the right hand side, CPU to the top left, and any other power cables you may need at this stage. Front panel cables will follow shortly afterwards. These include the JFP one to the bottom right, HD audio to the bottom left, and the USB 3 Type A and Type C port to the right hand side of the case. And then it's time for the GPU, and I have to say, although this card is obviously, it's a cheaper card, it's a bit more plastic, it actually feels really quite nice, and I like the design. It's pretty lightweight. The backplate being plastic isn't a bad thing for structural rigidity, and while the fans are a little smaller than you'd see on other cards, there are still 3 of them, which is going to help with cooling on the GPU. Now, I need to determine which PCI lanes to remove, so I'm going to hover the graphics card over, and it looks like the second and third PCI lane covers are the ones I'm going to need to take out. So I'm going to remove the thumb screws that come pre-installed and holding those into place, and then slide the graphics card in, and with a bit of luck, push that into place. Good stuff. And then just add the power cable in. Nice and easy. Of course, a couple of screws to secure the GPU down and stop it from going anywhere, and then this build is pretty much good to go. So there we have it. The PC's built and I think looks really great. Quite modest, but with nice little hints of RGB for a premium yet affordable feel. Now let's take a look at performance though, because that's what really matters. And start with F1 2024, which is running behind me in the built-in benchmark mode. At 1440p ultra-high settings with ray tracing enabled, DLSS set to quality, frame gen turned on, the build did really well with around 168 frames per second on average. In Alan Wake 2, results were good as well, a much harder to run, arguably AAA title, and here the build pulled in 90 24 frames per second on average. This was with DLSS set to quality, frame gen turned on, and ray tracing set to high too. Cyberpunk 2077 was next up, and carrying on with the RT and frame gen theme, here we had DLSS on quality, frame gen enabled, and ray tracing set to medium, the 1440p high settings preset. The system pulled in over 110 FPS with 114 frames per second to be precise, which again, I was really chuffed with. In Call of Duty's Black Ops 6 at 1440p high with no ray tracing or DLSS to contend with this time, tested of course in the in-game zombies mode, performance was once again really solid with 112 frames per second in this title. Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings blows everything else out the water as far as frame rate's concerned, with nearly 300 FPS on average, 291 frames per second on average throughout. Pretty nuts. While Hogwarts Legacy delivers 106 frames per second at 1440p high settings too. Finally, in Apex Legends, we saw some great frame rates too, over 230 FPS at 1440p high, which I was really pleased with. This is a build that, as I say, for a fairly proportionally decent amount of money, performs really well, looks fantastic, and is easy to put together. If you want to learn more about this build, you can check out latest pricing and availability for all the parts in the description below, and a write-up over on GeekaWhat.com too. Thanks for watching, get subscribed to see more from me, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.